Hi scientists! Last week in science we learned all about snails and you friends did an amazing job making your own little labeled snails. This week we're going to move on to our next animal, which are wiggly worms. First we're going to listen to me read our section on worms in our science book, and then at the end of the video I will have a fun little project for you to try out at home.
Okay, so we're going to begin with our reading. Our section in our book about worms is called Worms in Soil. Let's listen carefully because we are going to learn so much about worms. Worms are animals. Where do you find worms? These worms live in soil. We learned earlier that soil is another word for dirt. They get water and food from their soil. Worms need air, space, and shelter too. They get what they need from the soil. Some worms live in compost piles. Can you see the worms on the plants and soil? What are they doing? We're going to learn about why worms are so important and what they're doing in this picture. Worms eat dead leaves and fruit. They turn old plant parts into soil. The new soil helps young plants grow. Wow, so one of the most important jobs that worms have is that they turn old leaves and fruit into new soil, new fresh soil for plants. Some worms burrow deep into the soil. Others stay near the top. So these two worms, these two friends right here, are burrowing or digging themselves deep into the soil. Damp leaves lie on the top of soil. Worms stay moist under the leaves. They also find food there. Worms have segments. Segments help the worms move. If you look very closely at all of these worms in these pictures, we can see little lines on their bodies. Look very closely. Do you see those little lines? Those lines on the whole body of the worm are called segments, and the segments help the worm stretch its body and then go back, stretch and go back, and that's how worms move. They use those segments to help them move. Adult earthworms have a clitellum. The clitellum makes a case for the worm eggs. Baby worms grow inside of the eggs. So this part right here on the worm, we can see it looks a little bit different, is called the clitellum. Okay? Only adult earthworms have them. A worm's skin is moist and smooth. Worms breathe through their moist skin. Some worms live on land. You might have seen worms before in a garden or in some soil. But did you know some worms live in fresh water or salt water? I did not know that. So worms can live on land and some can live in water. That's a cool fact. How are these worms the same? How are they different? So when we look at all of these pictures of different types of worms, I can see something that this is the same about them is the shape of their body. All of them are little and long, but I can also see how they're very different. All of them look very different from each other. The color, this one looks like it has little legs on the bottom. Okay, so we're going to stop here with our reading all about worms. And next, I'm going to show you a fun project you can try out at home.
So in our reading, we learned that worms have two really special parts on their bodies. One part is called their segments, and the other part is called their clitellum. So we are going to do a little project that looks like this. You're going to create your own worm that can move around with the different body parts we learned about, okay? So to make this project, all you need is any kind of paper, just a piece of paper, and a pair of scissors, and something to write with. Now the first step is to take your scissors and your piece of paper and just cut one long strip of paper. You can cut right down the piece of paper. Just like this. You want one nice long strip of paper. Now the next step, something I wanted to do, is round out the corners of the paper because worms are smooth, they have no pointy bits, they're very round. So I'm going to round out both the top and the bottom corners of my piece of paper. Just like that. Okay, so now your strip of paper is rounded at both ends. The next step is to label our worm. So I'm going to take my marker that I have, and first I'm going to label the clitellum. The clitellum is on the adult worms, and it's kind of a little section like this on its body, and we can write the word clitellum to label. It's a tricky word, so make sure you look back at Miss Lambert's. C-L-I-T-L-L-U-M. Clitellum. Now the second body part that we're going to draw and label on our little worm are the segments. The segments are just the lines on the rest of the worm's body. So you want to take your pencil or marker and draw lines all the way down the rest of the worm's body. And then for the top part, more segments. And since this is a fun worm, if you want to give it a little face, you can, a little smiley face. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the back of my worm, because for this project we'll see the front and the back. So I'm going to trace all my lines and do the same thing on the back. Okay, now we can't forget to label the segments. So just like we labeled the clitellum, we can label the segments. I'm just gonna write right over them. Segments. Okay, and the final step, the step that's going to get your worm wiggly and moving, is to fold our worm's body to represent or to show how the worm uses its segments to move. So we're going to start at one of the ends. You're going to fold it over one way, and then you're going to take that whole fold and fold it the other way. Okay? And we're going to do this down the whole worm's body. So I fold it in, then I fold it away, then I'm going to fold back in, and then away. This can get a little bit tricky, so you can ask an adult or a grown-up to help you, but you want to just keep folding backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. all the way to the other end. Then, when you open up your worm, we can show how the worm moves by pinching it in and then pulling it out. Had fun learning about worms this week. If you have the chance to make your own worm at home with labels, I would love to see a picture or a video of it on your class dojo. I hope you friends have an amazing day and rest of the week, and I will see you next time.